Welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation will highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. Today's guest is Kristina Karcic, a seasoned HR and business leader with more than 20 years' experience shaping people and operational strategies across global enterprises and high-growth startups. As founder of Karcic Partners, she partners with visionary founders and executives to build scalable, people-first organizations that align culture, operations, and strategy, accelerating growth and earning trust of their boards. Please welcome Kristina. Welcome, Kristina. I am so grateful to have you on Still Evolving and to learn from you. We're going to jump right in that conversation. Could you please share a bit of your journey and the motivations that have fueled you along the way?
Amazing. So it's been quite a journey, to be honest with you. Like everybody, it's not worth having if there weren't a lot of struggles along the way, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of persistence and perseverance. And I can pretty much start anywhere. But I think what's been really critical to me and which I'm always grateful for is for individuals that are just open and honest and giving that direct feedback. And sometimes I'll be honest, I've gotten it where I'm like, oh, wow, it had to come on that way.
Yeah.
But if you take it as an opportunity, then you're constantly learning and you're constantly evolving. So that's the way I look at life is constantly, I hate to say, it, but life is unfair. And it's always about looking ahead and looking at the challenges and how can we better ourselves along the journey, if that makes sense.
For sure. You mentioned the power that could come in that feedback, but also alluded to how sometimes that's really hard. I can relate to that. Sometimes people have really good intentions, and yet the delivery just misses the mark. And it's really easy to not hear it. Just, our minds are trying to protect us, and if it feels off putting or just kind of triggers that defensive response, then you could end up with a bigger problem, kind of going down a rabbit hole in that interaction, but also really importantly, missing that power that could come from the lessons and that in the content and what their intention had been. Could you tell a little bit of what you're working on now and perhaps how feedback has shaped your leadership and your pursuits in present day?
Oh, wow. Yes, definitely. So actually, what I'm working on now, the last year, I took, I would say about like 50% of the time to really dedicate to a true sabbatical and really reflect and think about, okay, well, what was great and why was it, in my opinion or in others? And then also, like, what did we get wrong? And how could we have gotten it better? And then really understand within myself where my weaknesses were and to be able to double down and say, okay, let me develop these into actual strengths. With that said, I am really excited to be launching Karcic Partners. Karcic Partners is really focused on ensuring that we get into organizations and we set them up for success. We're in this really unique opportunity where when you're dealing with everything talent, you have the opportunity to impact everything within the organization. And if you can impact that and build according to the culture, the strategy, the size of the organization, you can really unlock its potential. But I was able to get there through deep reflection, and as well as studying and enabling myself to just get stronger in different areas so that I could put together a playbook for that. So that's long, but what I'm doing right now.
I love it. It sounds exciting. And it certainly, when you talk about evolving, the power of reflection as a critical component in that process.
Yes.
I always kind of chuckle. You'll hear more in the sport domain than sometimes private industry. But when you hear the phrase like, oh, we're just focusing on the process, there have been moments where I've had a whole auditorium full of athletes. And I was like, we're focusing on the process, right? And of course, everybody's like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, well, what is that? And then all of a sudden there's crickets, and people then start considering what really that means to them. And in my experience, reflection is a fundamental in process for high performance. You have take that time so deliberately and engage in that power of reflection. It also sounds as if other sources of learning and growth, but I'm curious of your reflection practice. Is there a specific reflective practice that you have found as a leader to be really impactful in gaining that clarity, perhaps making some of those tough choices, launching your own firm or even some of like a day-to-day decision that may feel pressurous in some way. But what specific reflective practice have you found to be so impactful?
Wow. So that there's a lot actually. So it really first and foremost starts with, I'll be honest, I think it's just the way that my brain is wired. Every time I do anything, I reflect on it. I'm always analyzing everything and okay, well, how did that go? Could it have gone better? What could I have done better? Think about what I've said. The part of it is my personality and I like to constantly reflect. One of the things that I struggled with, and I'll be honest with you, I'm finally at a really good place is gathering feedback from others. So afraid of failure and so afraid to get that feedback that I wasn't good enough, if that makes any type of sense. And I shied away from it for many years. And I had to just like face that. And I think that's a critical part of reflection is yes, we can assess ourselves and sometimes we're our worst critics, but it's really intentional to get what other people are seeing, what they saw that is good, what can be improved upon, because there can also often be a gap. And two things can happen. Either you're really, really hard on yourself when you don't need to be, or you're completely blind to the things that you need to. So I think when it comes to reflection, a part of it is internal and giving ourselves the space to do that, but feedback is critical. And then when you're talking in business, it's so critical. Anytime you complete anything, and even if you're in a project, don't wait to the end to review. As you're going through the project, make space for learning. That's going to be very, very critical. And then as a leader, I have a whole story behind it, but how you evolve as a leader is, yes, definitely get training. No one is perfect. To a certain extent, yes, some people might be born a leader, but our world is changing ever so quickly. You need some primary skills and you need to constantly go back and refresh yourself because as much as you try to develop those habits, I can't tell you how many times, and I'll be honest, it happens with me when I'm giving training and I'm like, oh, I should be doing that a little more. Training, you're not going to reflect on it. So find ways to just remind yourself of some of the key elements we need to do as leaders to be there for our team and really be able to bring out the best in them. And truly, at the end of the day, you want to drive performance for your organization through that.
I love it. A couple of things I really heard in there that's so aligned when we talk about still evolving is one, the power of mindsets. You talked about reflective can be this internal kind of mining for lessons learned or your own self beliefs around maybe what could have done differently or what you want to keep doing to optimize in whatever, say, giving a training or whatever performance. But that mindset around making sense of that reflective data as just that, as it's data informing your evolution rather than informing you that there's something wrong, like you failed, right? So the mindset shift there, it sounds like it was really powerful for you as when maybe perhaps when you were younger, that fear of failure and how your mindset was wrapped around this data being kind of threatening in that way versus shifting that mindset to seeing it as just a treasure trove of information that you can use to evolve. And then the second piece I hear, which I love, is in reflection, it's actions of reflection. And you took action to go out and ask people, what do they think? What can they provide you? What feedback might they have for you? And I always kind of chuckle, like you'll hear the word after action used a lot. Sometimes people use debriefing or some type of, and it could be very informal. It could also be a formal process that teams use. And key in that after action is action, right? Otherwise, it's just active reflection and you're just kind of sitting back, but then nothing gets done to iterate, to evolve and move forward with new habits, new workflow process, those behaviors that are so critical. Appreciate you sharing on that, the power of the mindsets and the actions that come in reflection. We also talk about this is a grind, to launch your own firm or to evolve and leadership roles in private industry. It is a grind, right? So I'm curious how you have, are there favorite recovery habits or ways that which you have continued to fuel yourself to sustain high performance over that period in your career? So do you have recovery practices or habits that really help you keep going?
Yeah. First and foremost, I'll be honest, it comes back to, physical health helps keep your mind active and at top performance. So, yeah, I try to remain just active. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a bodybuilder. I don't have this incredible, I wish I did. I don't have this incredible body, but it's everything from, you know what, bringing up my desk, walking on a walking pad underneath, just keeping myself going. And sometimes what I really love to do is just take a break and take my dog and go for a walk, right? Like those are critical pieces because without those breaks, you don't actually have time. You don't have time to just recharge, reboot. But then also, to be honest with you, you don't have time for like even just reflection, right? Because you're
Yeah,
just running, running, running and you're feeding the animal. You're
right.
like, okay. But in
Yeah.
those times when you have grind, you have to find those happy places where you can just separate yourself, breathe, and if you can get a little activity in, but the activity is critical. If I feel like it fuels the brain. So I do make sure, try to work out a couple of times a week, try to get my walks in, just try not to be completely sedentary because that'll just add to the stress and to the chaos. And then honestly, just making sure that you constantly stay stimulated. I think that's the biggest thing, right? Because we can get stuck in such a reactive state. And how do you make sure that you take time so that you can get stimulated and see further than what's just in front of you, right? But unfortunately, it's very, very hard in our day and age to do that. So it's really a habit that we have to form.
Just to be able to like flex out that cognitive flexibility that can be so helpful dealing with adversity, but also just in high performance, being able to have the innovative or creative mind available fully to continuing that project. I so appreciate you and the realness that physical activity is a fundamental need for high performance. And at the same time, what that looks like in your performance domain may not be a 3 hour workout at the gym or a 2 hour run every day, right? So, one of the experiences we've had as we've provided holistic high performance services, coaching services, especially for the corporate athlete, is a good part of this conversation, right? People are like, oh, but they aren't training to be on the podium or jump out of a plane, right? So what is so important is understanding what is the load that you are carrying and performing and trying to optimize your performance in that domain. So you just mentioned it. The cognitive load is intense. Like we're on these screens all day long. And then sadly, many of us in our personal lives, we're also using those screens. The cognitive load is so heavy, and yet your physical foundations really support your brain's ability to optimize that functioning, right? So even though some of us are weekend warriors, maybe we're running races on the weekend or playing that round of golf, but it doesn't have to be this all or nothing space of, oh, I'm grinding at the gym. It can be a walking pad. It can be taking the dog for a walk, getting out, connecting with nature, being outside in the sun. All of those fundamental activity or recovery practices really can just those micro doses really help you in both a day to day, but also sustain over time. So thank you for that. One, I guess, aspect of curiosity is if you could talk now also about not just those individual practices, but the power that has come from kind of the connection in your world. So you mentioned a bit about when we were talking about feedback, how you would reach out to others, perhaps in your team or other leaders to help you grow your perspective and learn. But I'm just curious in what other ways relationships have helped you through your leadership evolution and now leading this firm. Could you talk more about your connections?
Yeah, actually, what really defined me as a leader are two things, and they actually really don't have anything to do with what I do on a day-to-day basis. The first one was, well, it both center around my children. So I have 2 children. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, and it's fun and it's exciting and it's crazy and it's hectic. But my oldest, he had some issues when he was going through schooling. I knew something was off, and trying to figure out and work through that and understand that. And I don't even like he learns different. And actually so do I. So, it's inherited.
Yeah.
And so I don't like to use the word learning disability because it's not. It's just a different way of learning. And when I realized that, I realized, okay, I got to get involved with the school. I really want to understand what's happening at the school. But then also I wanted to understand how to best support him and how to make sure that with children that learn differently, they're not neurotypical. What can happen is in the typical neuro world of schooling in public school, they can get lost. And what I like, the way I equate it to is they can lose that light that they have in them, that light for hunger for learning when it becomes such a struggle, right? So how do I ensure that his light doesn't go out? So in order to do that, I ended up volunteering. I got involved with the PTA. I ended up leading the PTA, which was crazy because it was during a time that it was really developing as a professional. But it really, to learn how to lead and learn how to lead in a setting where people are not getting paid to be with you is probably one of the best ways to learn to lead. And it was such an exceptional opportunity to get in and say, okay, and there was a lot of chaos. How do we organize this? How do we set this up so that we can function to highest performance? But then most importantly, I don't want to do this forever. How do I pass it on? So honestly, I was learning a lot of my leadership skills through there. And a lot of it came naturally and a lot of it I had to learn. But at the same time, I was also getting behavioral therapy from my son. And as I started to learn how to better interact, how to better set him up for success, I was like, these are leadership skills. Like everybody needs to have these. So for me, it's always like and you'll start to see that I'm a practical learner. So whenever I can take something and apply it, so I was applying it to leading the PTA, I was applying it to raising my son, and then I constantly evolved in it. And it's been really, really great for my relationship with my children. I got to be honest with you.
It's awesome. I think that's so powerful and a healthy reminder that we all have many opportunities to be leaders. Oftentimes, that conversation comes so narrowly focused in the performance domain that we're in, right? Sport, military, business. We often start conversations when we meet people like, what do you do? And there's so much more to leadership. And especially when we think about how we can leave that legacy, how we can lift the next generation up, and how we can make and empower or strengthen our communities. I think there is so many opportunities, so many leadership needs out there. So you're absolutely right. Like indeed, when you're in some of those volunteer roles, truly you learn enormous amount that then is also transferable. So then,
Yes.
you took some of those skills into these other roles, whether that's as mom or whether that's as professional executive, you took some of those leadership skills with you. So thank you. That is fantastic. So we drive home here in our conversation. We like leaving the audience with one immediate actionable takeaway, that one specific tool or strategy that you use in your day-to-day world to help you optimize your performance and the many roles that you are in. So really, like if nothing else, we can talk about it intellectually and all this sounds right. But if people really know, like, what the heck can I do? I just need something I can try. Is there one piece of advice you would have as a key takeaway for our audience today?
I do. And I'm going to first emphasize that when you're constantly evolving, there are so many dimensions to it, right? It is complex and there's a lot of pieces that you can take and you can learn from. But I think the one key thing that we all need to do and do better is active listening. I think it is a critical component because you can't actually take the feedback if you're not listening to what's being said, right? And we're not taught to actively listen. That's just not our default. Our default is listen to, okay, what do I got to do? How do I defend? It's not to take a moment and truly listen to what that person is saying. And that will be critical if you're a parent, if you're leading, if you're just simply, it could be anything, just in anything you do. And like you said earlier, you can always bring it back. Honestly, in our current political environment, I really feel if we just actually took a moment and listened to each other, we actually have more in common than we do that separate us, but we just don't take the time.
Love it. So powerful. Thank you, Kristina, for sharing your journey as we are all still evolving and can learn from each other. Thank you very much. Until next time. Thank you.